Well, man, I'm so thrilled that we're doing this, man. I've been thinking about asking you this for a long time, and I just never got around to it.
Well, you're a very busy man. You have what I hear people call, what is it? A job
Isn't
or
a
a
job?
life. Yeah, I just those words they get mixed up. No, we're
Yeah,
both busy old farts, but this is it's great whether it's recorded or not. Awesome to see and hear from you, my friend,
yeah.
because it's been. I thought about it earlier today. Over 30 years we've known each other.
I was wondering if you were going to say that.
Oh, should I not have?
No. I'm just. Some people are touchy about the numbers. I'm like, it's 30 years.
No,
People are like, shut up. So,
I mean, there's just no denying time and its passage. But no, I actually take great pride of that. Anyone I know, longer than 5 years, I'm just impressed
that they stuck around.
that they stuck around, that I didn't piss them off to any great degree.
Yeah.
Well, more than normal, but still, yeah, no, it's a source of great pride that I've known you for this long, and I wish we weren't so far separated. And you hear
I
that
know.
from our mutual friend Jerry all the time too.
Yeah.
How awesome
Li-
would it be to have you just like around? Would be awesome.
Likewise. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, I would love to be there, and I do. I totally intend to visit Portland.
Why doesn't your
ASAP.
band come play up here?
It's hard to get. Yeah, I mean, going north, that far north, we've just never done, and that far west. I guess we've been to California and stuff. Going out that way, that direction, is a lot more
Oh, of course.
difficult and time consuming.
Yeah.
But
But
we're gonna do it.
I know a place here in town that would love to have you just because you'd be a natural fit, which is Kel's Irish Pub, which is
Oh,
a pretty great live music venue. Not huge. I mean, it's small-ish, but as far as I think there's probably a good Celtic music contingent up here that would love to have you.
yeah, oh, absolutely.
No, this is a great idea. To catch up.
Yeah.
But also, that made me really sad when I read your email and you're like, I don't have any nerd friends. I can't talk about.
It's true. It's
That's
true.
okay. I mean, you find
Yeah.
yourself in. When I was working at that bookstore, Powell's here in Portland is like huge. It's the world's biggest bookstore, and I enjoyed my time there. Management be damned, but I really did. But it's when you end up anywhere that out of necessity that you really start going, is there anyone here like me? I mean, I had lots of work friends, but yeah, finding people on the same wavelength who like this thing or that thing. I mean, that's life. Is just trying to find your community. And
Yeah.
you get lucky sometimes. And certainly at a bookstore, I ran into plenty of nerds that I didn't, share. I mean, I'm not a gamer really much, or I'm not much of a fantasy novel reader. In fact, I'm really not a huge fan of that. But I mean, there's plenty of comic nerds and writers and all kinds of theater folk, and it's fine. So
Hmm.
I've been lucky.
Yeah.
I've ended up with people around that get some of the stuff I do, and you took the road of rock and roll.
Yeah. No, it's it's funny. Patrick and I, but Patrick Devlin, the lead singer of Blaggards.
Yeah, actually, you do have to tell me which Patrick, because
Yeah,
we
I
know
know.
another Patrick. I'm
Yeah,
like, what? What happened?
we know another Patrick who's also a guitar player.
Yeah,
songwriter.
there you go.
But Patrick and I will talk about music all day long.
Yeah.
Recording, songwriting, musicians that we admire and all that stuff. But yeah, when it comes to movies, anything that has to do with superheroes or Star Wars, that kind of stuff, he's like, you can't talk about it with him. He does love James Bond. He's very fond of James Bond, which is
I actually
cool.
think there's a strange sort of crossover community with that, because it is interesting. I've ran into to similar people where it'll be something along those lines which bumps up against, and I'm like, great, I can talk Bond with you. I love Bond.
Yeah.
Awesome. But you ever think about watching this Black Widow movie? And it's like, okay, well, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry that you've been shunned, but I'm here to welcome you into the community that we share.
Yeah. But what I do know is that quite a bit of our fans are into this stuff. Blaggards fans are nerds.
Yay!
So I have a feeling that they might enjoy this. I hope so. Anyway.
I hope so. Why don't we? I mean, I guess because it's a podcast of sorts. Because we're recording. Introduce yourself, and then
Okay.
I'll introduce myself, and we should talk about how we know each other.
That's right.
Look at me looking for structure.
I know that's important. And that's why I'm so thrilled that you already have experience with this.
Ish. Yeah.
Because you've been guided by your friend John.
John's insane. John is one of those guys, and he is definitely of our community. John's a cast member of the live show that I do,
Right.
and he's in his 30s, early 30s, and that guy was brought up on Nick at Night and TV Land. Like, you can't stump him with a reference. He is so much younger than us, but he knows shows that, you know, from our childhood, that I'm like, how do you know about Misfits of Science? How do you know about, you know, even how do you know about Mannix, you know, like stuff like that from the 70s? And the kid just knows. The kid, he's 30 something years old, but
Wow.
but he is a deep nerd. He has so many podcasts. One's all about comics and pop culture related stuff, and I've guested on that one several times. He has then he got the idea of doing one that was about the classic monsters, because we both talked about, we had the Universal Monster Collection Blu-ray box set, and I was like, oh, and a great box set. He's like, yeah, why don't we do a podcast where we go through those and then we keep tracking the classic, like Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, Wolfman. I was like, okay. And now we're up to the 90s. Literally, we've got like 4 or 5 seasons. And we started in the pandemic. We just do a movie a week.
Oh,
so,
okay, cool.
Been doing that, and that's fun. And we just started doing one about Kolchak the Night Stalker. Again, show from the 70s that this youngster is like, oh, I love Kolchak. So, yeah.
Which I remember you telling me about, you know,
oh,
30 years ago.
It's, I mean, no one could say it's a great show because it was of its time and had no budget. But as influential, it's like the whole thing where they say, it's like, yeah, not so many people you know, bought the records of the Velvet Underground, but everyone that did formed a band that ended up being amazing. Just like, yes, Kolchak the Night Stalker, not so many people watched it, but the people who did ended up making, you know, X-Files and everything else. It's influential. And I love
the Velvet Underground of pop culture.
Yes, Kolchak is the Velvet Underground of 70s TV. But anyway, so done a few podcasts. But first off, who the hell are you?
Yeah. I'm Chad Smalley. I'm the bass player and backup singer in a band called Blaggards. Been doing this for 18 years now.
That is so nuts.
I know this guy, Brendan, from, as we mentioned, several decades ago.
Years. Yeah.
Through the other Patrick that we already mentioned, Patrick White.
You were a student at HSPVA.
Yeah. Yeah. And Patrick was 2 years behind me. I think he graduated in 89. It's like 2 years after I did.
89. Yeah. And I met him through working at the River Oaks movie theater.
Right. That's
now,
where I met you first.
For those who don't know, HSPVA High School for the Performing and Visual Arts in Houston, Texas, which is where we met. Chad, you're it's like I'm interviewing you, but this is also, you are a Houston native, right?
Yeah, no, I wasn't born here. I was born in Woodbury, New Jersey.
Oh, okay.
But we moved to Houston when I was 7. So
right.
1976. So
oh boy,
it was a long time ago, y'all. So yeah, I consider myself from Houston because I don't really.
No, yeah, I mean that's a huge chunk. We left, like I was born in Mississippi, and we left when I was just turning 9. And I do remember a lot of my childhood in Mississippi. And I say that's where I'm from because it is where I was born, and then, you know, for a little bit. But we bounced around so much. I didn't get to Texas till 6th grade. So I was about to be 13 or was 13. So, yeah, I spent the longest amount of time of any of the places I lived in Houston. I just don't like to say I'm a Texan. I mean, not of any shame, but it's just like, yeah, I don't know. I kind of just go back to the origin. It's like, I'm Mississippian, whatever. And again, so much fortunate, awesome stuff came out of me living in Houston. I can't sit there and just go, I can't be ashamed of that city. So many great people there. And talk about finding your community. I think that's where I got really lucky because I didn't go to PVA. If it hadn't been for my brother, because we were out in the suburbs, if it hadn't been for my brother getting a job at River Oaks Theater, it seems I've always followed my brother. Like, he does the thing first, then I do it, and that's okay. It's not hero worship because, again, he's a punk, but but at the same time, it's like, well, he laid groundwork. So he worked at River Oaks Theater, which is downtown, close to the Montrose area and close to where PVA was. So a lot of his coworkers were from the school. Then I start going to the River Oaks Theater because it's cool, because it's downtown, and I'm coming in from Sugarland. Watch out. And then I got a job there at the theater. And then through working at that one movie theater, I met people who've gone on to be incredibly successful in various fields, brilliant creative people. And yes, ended up forming my first band out of that with friends from my high school out in Sugarland, but our mutual friend Patrick, who went to PVA, and through that band, that's how I got to meet you. Yeah. And I will say this, not to butter you up, but we haven't talked in a long time. You, Chad Smalley, I'm so happy that music is still a part of your life. I really hope you are still writing your own stuff, because I love your songwriting. Always.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Yeah.
I am getting slowly moving back towards it. Patrick himself, Patrick Devlin, has been trying to be, come on, do your songs. He knows. The thing that I recognized many years ago is that this is one of those things, like with Zeus's Pedals, your band, which we'll get into in a minute.
Do we have to?
That was you and Patrick.
Yeah.
You and Patrick White.
Yeah.
Were the songwriters for that band primarily. Obviously there was a lot of collaboration going on. But that was, in order to have a successful band, you kind of recognize who the driving force is.
Right.
And we attempted this early on. Like I attempted to write songs for Patrick to sing, and this was before he'd really found his voice as a songwriter.
Yeah.
So I realized at some point I just need to let him find his own way to what it is that he wants to do.
Is that kind of the thing? It's like, yeah, this is working, but I've got my own thing.
Yeah. Because there was some stuff I wrote early on. He was like, man, this is great. But when it came time to actually doing it, it just didn't feel right. You know?
Yeah.
So thankfully that was a long time ago. And now our latest album, which I've got somewhere. Oh, it's right here.
By the way, awesome cover.
Yeah. This is done by our friend Vicente, who's a Spanish madman professional designer.
It's gorgeous. Yeah.
He's actually done work for Guinness and a lot of other big brands.
I wouldn't be surprised. Look at that. No, awesome. Congratulations on that. It does do my heart glad to know you're still working on your stuff, because and I also understand the creative process being it can be driven. In other words, it can be something you force, but it really is it has its own whims. Mm-hmm. Like my huge drive when I was younger to draw comics. It's a quiet little thing. Like I still draw occasionally if I'm asked, especially if there's a little bit of a paying gig. But it's just like, all right, shaking the rust off and then do it. And I'm like, oh God, this is but I just remember what it used to be like, where that stuff just flowed. And for the writing, I haven't thought in terms of like screenwriting or playwriting in so long, because I'm doing a whole other thing. And lyrics, like our friend Patrick White, still to this day, occasionally will say, do you have new lyrics for me? Because he still likes to write to my words, which is very flattering. And then I go, I just haven't thought in the terms of lyrics, because it is a different muscle. And I'm like, yeah, I haven't thought in terms of poetry or lyrics. It's all about story and character these days.
Sure. Because the meat of the original Zeus's Pedals catalog, or your original, although that huge group of songs that was all stuff that you'd written.
Not like all of it, but yes, right? a lot of it was early stuff. And what's so funny is because everyone we met after, except for a singer-songwriter like yourself, but where it's a whatever comes first comes first. But in the case of us, every band that would meet us would be like, dude, you guys are doing it backwards. Because I would just write weird, funny poems, but I would like, okay, here's a bridge section or but I can't think of a melody. Like, I can't write music. I would just write lyrics to a song that didn't exist. And then Patrick would just take it, and then he would pound out something that took it farther than I ever would have, because he's like, well, yeah, you wrote literally verse, chorus, and now it's 14 minutes long. They're like, holy shit.
Yeah.
But that's his genius. And
Yeah.
so, again, a fortunate meeting where it's just like, I would never have come up with music like that. He probably never would have come up with words like that. And it was just very fortuitous. And working with him was very easy. Even when we tried second and third band together, they all worked in their own way. I was very proud that we kept evolving our style and could still support each other. Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah.
But oh, and by the way, everybody, I'm Brendan Jones. I was like, oh.
Yes, there you go. Finally, 20 minutes in.
20 minutes in, these people just listen to his chat, which is probably what we're going to be doing. But yeah, I'm Brendan Jones, and currently, I guess I would say, I mean, I am a writer and sometimes illustrator, actor, sometimes singer. I miss the singing. I'll tell you that much. I miss that from being in the bands.
I miss your singing too.
Oh, dude. Do you remember when we were going to do a duo? We were going to do like and we were working on a set together, and we just didn't get it together, which was a shame.
Yeah.
Because we blend really well, or did. We blended very well.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember my mistake back then was thinking that I could banter with you on stage. I suck. I don't do it. Patrick Devlin of Blaggards is a genius at stage banter. And that's, again, it's like, you just need to let him do his thing. And because he just goes.
I mean, it's its own thing. And it is just another part of the performing thing. And I've seen very taciturn performers. Everyone's different, but I've seen people who have absolutely no personality and their music still blows you away. You're not that. But you are just a quieter guy. I remember you opening for us all the time, and your stage banter was fine. It just was of a different
it's
key.
different.
Yeah,
right.
It was like,
but I see myself when I'm with Blaggards, I always think of myself as the is Teller the one that's the quiet one?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm like Teller. Patrick will be making jokes, and I'll be back there just reacting quietly to what he does, and that works. It's worked for a long time.
Dude, because my father is he's quite old. He's still hanging in there. But I found these cassettes that were a gift from him to me and my brother, and they were his band's last show. A live recording of his folk trio in the 60s. And it was their last show at this club in New Orleans where they were like the house band, quite beloved. And it was 2 sets. Early night where they're really fresh and on. Late night when they have been drinking quite a bit because everyone's like going, oh, it's your last show, let me buy you something. And they're still pretty tight. It's just they are gone. But what's interesting about it is when you're listening to that, I was like, oh, that's what my dad's voice sounded like as a young man. Very high tenor. And then also their stage banter was very not scripted, but they had worked out bits like they were the Smothers Brothers. So the lead singer guy, who wasn't my dad, very smooth, and he was well-spoken, like, ladies and gentlemen, blah, blah, blah. So he was the cool leading guy, and it was my dad who was the goof. Like, that was his role. And he's playing it up. Like, his voice is up here, and his nickname was Tiger. It's like, and the lead singer would be like, Tiger, what are you doing there? Oh, nothing. And it'd be some, like, joke, a bit they'd worked out. And they did actual stuff like, oh, did I ever tell you about that girl I dated? And it'd be like this joke they had written, and it's like, pretty funny. But also just like, my dad's playing a character on stage, and that's what he was known for.
That's so cool.
It's like they had band meetings to say, all right, I'll be this guy. You be this guy. And then the third guy would occasionally chime in, but he was pretty quiet. It was mainly my dad and the lead. But I was like, this is corny. but I loved it just because it was so relatable. I was like, this is kind of what every band does. And in Zuzu's Pedals, we all had our personalities. And like, okay, I know that Patrick doesn't talk a lot. He's not going to talk a lot, but he's going to make his wacky faces and he's going to play the guitar like a maniac. And then you're going to have Jerry goofing off over on the keyboards and chiming in. So, you know, we all find our way. We all find our way.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. But
that's so cool. I want to hear this, the recording of your dad.
Oh yeah.
I totally forgot.
I mean, it's all covers. It's all covers. And well, what I was saying was for him, I digitized it. I found one of those little gadgets to take from a cassette and digitize it. And then I also sent it through like noise reduction and stuff and sent it to him as MP3s, and it blew him away. He was very, very pleased. It is hilarious to hear him like go, I'd just like to say, over there is my wife, and our little boy. She had brought Robin. This is in the 60s. Robin was maybe a year or two old, like a little baby. So my mom's in a bar with my it's like, oh, there's my wife Kay and our little boy Robin. It's like going, this explains a lot. And I'm not born yet, obviously. But anyway, so but I love that. It's very fun. And it's all, they are really tight. They almost got a record deal because one of the big bands of the day. This is for the audience at home. You guys are loving this, right? You don't know who the hell I am.
Right.
But like the Kingston Trio or somebody, one that came through New Orleans and they opened for this big band and folk band. And the folk band was like, we will take you back to LA. You know, you're great. We should get our label interested in you, maybe cut an album and my dad was the one who put the kibosh on it because Robin was just an infant and he didn't want to move them. They would have been going out to the West Coast. And my dad still, that's one is like, yeah, I almost made it big. It's like, okay, Dad. But they are really tight and they're doing stuff like hang down your head, Tom Dooley, hang down your head and cry. It's all that kind of stuff.
Nice.
Yeah, and he's playing the stand-up bass. That was his instrument. That has been Brendan Talks About His Dad. That's a new segment here on our podcast.
So what's the story with because I've broached this subject with Patrick White.
Okay, listen.
And you and Jerry sometimes.
I agreed to do this as long as we would not talk about what happened at the VMAs or any of the standing allegations against me in our civil suit.
We'll skirt around that.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but I'm just as a huge ZZP, Zuzu's Pedals fan.
Oh, dude.
I was there at the beginning.
Yeah, you were.
That's when we met.
But it's ridiculous to think of you as a fan because you are an addendum. You are our buddy. It's like you can't be a fan and that. Though I would say I'm a huge Chad Smalley fan, and there's the log rolling.
I just felt really honored stuff. Thank you.
Yeah,
but there was some of my fondest memories are back in those days because at the time, Dwight and I were trying to start a new band after our previous band had just
Elemental Penguin
imploded. No, The Change.
Oh, The Change, right.
Was after that. And at some point, we ran into Patrick White somewhere, and he was totally into doing it. So we started working with him. But we could never we keep the lineup together. But what was cool though is that he mentioned that he was starting to do stuff with you at the time.
Yeah. And
so when our project kind of fell apart, a lot of the ideas that we had been working on became Zuzu's Pedal songs.
Oh wow!
There was Sir Rock a Lot, that riff. We were doing something that had completely different format or structure, and Post No Bills was another one.
Oh my God! Really? I had no idea
that I actually wrote some really bad lyrics for. that was the only song we performed too.
Where was that?
At Zelda's one night.
At Zelda's, there you go.
For Trip Sutherland's birthday on Trip was the sound guy there back then. Yeah. So it was great to see these ideas like actually become what they were meant to be, a little bit later.
Patrick does, and I'm going to assume, the thing I always say is I love to sing. I haven't been doing it in a long time, but I don't consider myself a musician, and that's not self-deprecation. It's just you point me towards a song and help me learn it, and then I can tinker with it. I can find some things in it and do it my way, but I don't think in terms of music. So that's what always blows me away about, like yourself, composers, and the fact of Patrick. He has this memory, even post traumatic brain incidents like
Yeah.
he's had. He has this memory for riffs, bits, and he of course records constantly. He records literally just a section because it just came to him, and that's what he does, like note taking. But he has like a library, and I've heard him bring stuff back from years before past. He, when we did our last band here in Portland, because he ended up in Portland as well as me and our friend Jerry, so 3 of the Zuzu's Pedals guys. And our last band started out being called Cudgels of Divine Grace, which I always loved, but they're like going, people don't know what a cudgel is. And people were saying cuddles. And I was like, yeah, but Cudgels of Divine Grace, I love it. But we changed the name to Capra-esque, which is a fine name. I liked that one too.
Weren't you? I guess this was before y'all moved away from Houston. It was Great Caesar's Ghosts briefly, right?
Oh man, I don't think we ever performed as that. We were talking about that.
All right.
We were talking about changing it to Mad Tea Party because of our our manager wanted to send us on a East Coast tour, and there was a Zuzu's Pedals band already.
Was that when we were doing Hot Cup of Joe tour?
We were going to possibly take that on tour, yeah.
Which I was going to be a part of. Yeah.
You, of course you were. I don't remember if we had a backup for Carolyn, like who we were going to have.
Yeah, I remember that was
because Carolyn
a big point of contention at the time.
But man, anyway. but the whole thing is that yeah, and so when we were in that band, which of course is years past ZZP, he would occasionally go, "Do you remember this?" Like when we were just like working on new stuff, and he'd pull this thing out, and I was like, "That does sound vaguely familiar." He goes, "Well, it was going to be a chunk of that song this was going to be Abducted by Love, but I've thought of a way to reconfigure it into this, and now we can do it." I was like, "Cool, man." Yeah. Especially since no one but the oldie moldies remember anything about Abducted by Love.
Do you remember this? I just remember this now that you and Patrick and I were in his living room at his parents' apartment, and we were working on a cover of Father and Son by Cat Stevens. You remember that? And you and I were doing, it was like, I think you were singing the Father and I was singing the Son or something like that.
Yes, vaguely.
It was really difficult to get to the song without crying.
Yeah.
Like every time.
Yeah.
I can't remember if we ever actually performed that anywhere.
No, we never did. Yeah. I think the ones that we performed, it was almost always during your set. And it would be like, we would do, we do Space Oddity. That was one of the ones we did a lot.
There was a really great, do you remember that the one time, maybe it wasn't the one time, but the first time we did that, where I was doing a solo show, you and Brent, sorry,
Me and
Brendan,
I
and
hate that guy.
Y'all were working that night at River Oaks Theater, and so you couldn't be there. You had to close down the place and then meet me there. So it took you a bit longer to get there than I think you had planned, and so you both came running in, still in your tuxedo uniforms that you wear at work. Ran on stage, Patrick plugging in his guitar.
I do remember that,
and we did Space Oddity.
Yeah,
with the aforementioned Trip solo and running sound.
Trip was like the sound man of note at Fitzgerald's, and since we played at Fitzgerald's all the time, we dealt with Trip a lot, and dealt with it. Makes it sound no, he was an awesome guy.
He was great. Yeah,
he was great, and basically, as Patrick said, it's like. I know the secret to how to get, Trip and doing good sound. And it was always just bringing him weed. And I was like, you're a weird little drug thing, and that's fine. Leave me out of it. But Trip was always cool. I mean, I never noticed that he did worse sound if we didn't bring him weed. It's just that Patrick was convinced, like, yeah, that's how we get good sound out of Trip. Right. But yeah, I remember that. I remember when we were... you and I at Dwight and my apartment, working on possible set for a duo, like cover group. And I remember, which one was it? It was um, is the song called "Blessed" by Simon and Garfunkel?
Oh,
Blessed are the meek,
oh
for
yeah.
they shall inherit.
Right.
And we were both of us like trying to like, who's gonna be Garfunkel? Who's gonna do the high harmonies? And so we had Dwight uh as the judge of that. It's like, we'll do it and we'll both do it. We'll do it twice. This time you're gonna be Simon, you'll be on the bottom, and I'll be Garfunkel. Next time you and then Dwight was like, I think Brendan should be Garfunkel.
That's crazy. I have very little memory of that. That's so cool.
I just thought it was so funny that Dwight was just sitting there going, you guys sound great. And we're like, yeah, awesome. And we were picking songs that would obviously, harmony, blend, and stuff that we liked. Stuff also that you could play, because I can't play a damn thing. You were going to be it on guitar.
God.
And it was Beatles stuff, obviously. It was Simon and Garfunkel, obviously. I think there were like odd things like throwing in a couple of Bowie things. Not that he's known for, duos or harmonies, but I mean, there's not a way that we would have had an act that wouldn't have had, a little bit of Bowie, or
Yeah.
right behind you there, Mr. Gabriel. It's like there are certain artists that we were going to have to include just because we loved them. It's like, we'll figure out a harmony because we just love these guys.
The one thing I do remember from that brief effort, I don't know why it didn't work out.
Brief effort is going to be the name of my autobiography. Brief effort, the Brendan Jones story.
What we were one of the bits that we wanted to do was it was like a hee-haw thing for the band.
Yes.
But we didn't have any jokes scripted, and I just remember freezing every time. He's like, "Hey, Chad, yeah, what? God damn it!" That I couldn't think of anything to say.
Which actually, weirdly, I think would be very postmodern. A great way to do that is like, I got nothing.
Which I think is what we wound up doing most of the time.
I love that. Yeah, I remember that now. Jeez. Well, I miss that time too, mainly because, we are older now, and everyone gets nostalgic for their 20s and 30s. And for me, it was, I mean, to tell you the truth, when people are going, I had big dreams of how, I didn't really have big dreams. It would have been cool. That was always the thing. It's like, if we had been signed, if the thing became a reality, that would have been cool. I wasn't really aiming for it. I was just trying to challenge myself to come up with bigger, better, weirder, more original, more creative. And if we got an audience, great. But I didn't really like, let's go get interviewed by a local reporter. It wasn't that kind of stuff. But what I miss is that kind of stew where you and everyone you know is working on something.
Yeah.
And in a city that big, in Houston, where creative people have to find each other because the city's so damn big, and the city is kind of, it's a business town. It is a cow town, and it's not really about creativity. So that's why those people form such tight-knit groups.
Yeah.
Like I say, I was lucky because being an outsider to the HSPVA thing, I still ended up knowing so many of these great, talented people that came out of there, and people that were in the local, like U of H and so forth. Brilliant actors, brilliant writers and performers, and everyone was working on stuff. Visual artists, painters, and we all kind of benefited. It was like, you're sitting there going, well, I'm not just focused on our next show. I'm also going to do a bit in my friend's puppet thing he's doing over at literally my friend Joel Orr. I remember he was a puppeteer and did bizarre dark theater, and he's like, will you and your brother do this thing in our puppet show? I was like, yes. It's like we both of us, we ended up in so much stuff there, and it would be performances and live poetry readings. I was in a poetry group for a while. I mean, it was just That's what I miss, where it was just
Mhm.
like that community. And obviously, when you get older, your circle of friends shrinks anyway. Not for any reason other than everyone's lives just get too busy. But back then, it was just like walking down the street and going, "Know that guy? Know that girl? Know that? And we've done this together. We did the thing over here. How else would we have done Hot Cup of Joe, an operetta on stage, and gotten you as a character, and gotten Carolyn Wonderland, multi-Grammy winner Carolyn Wonderland, is in our
Yeah.
weird little theater piece, and she
Yeah.
loved it. And every time
Mhm.
I've had the opportunity to see her in years past, years since, L.A. bumped into her there. I've at least chatted with her when she was in Portland. But the whole thing is like, she's like, that was great. I love doing that. It's like awesome. It was
Yeah.
just a great time, and whether or not we all became megastars, it doesn't matter. It just it was awesome to be
Yeah.
in the middle of that kind of creativity. I just loved it.
Yeah. Absolutely. There was so many things too. And you're mentioning about that River Oaks
And also,
Theater.
there were terrible people
There,
and awful, awful performers. Some of the worst people. Well, like in
More-
any community, there were people like going, Jesus, what the hell is that guy's wrong?
yeah, of course. Oh no, here he comes again. Don't make eye contact. Yeah.
And we will be naming names on this podcast. That's what it's about.
Yes,
Let's
just
shame people from 30 years ago.
But you reminded me of something that at River Oaks Theater again, which was really was the hub of almost everything that
And
was
River
going
Oaks Theater,
on.
by the way, for the listeners who don't know, not a theater. It was a movie theater, and but it was just right there in the Montrose, which is Houston's creative center, kind of
Mhm.
the free lifestyle, alternate lifestyle center. And the theater itself wasn't showing, though though we certainly did show like Ghostbusters 2.
There was a
So
time, yeah,
yes, but it was the foreign film, art film,
yeah,
repertory film theater. And again, it attracted all these great personalities.
yeah, yeah. Thankfully it's been rescued now. It was
Yeah, I
landmark
heard.
landmark abandoned it,
I
and
signed that petition.
yeah, as did I. But it's been saved now by a local. I forget what they go, Studio City Grill or something like that.
Wow.
They
But
own
it will
several.
remain a movie theater?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. They're going to turn it into a sort of an Alamo Drafthouse style
Oh, great.
dinner theater
That
now,
is what it should be.
which is kind of what it was trying to be in its day. So
I don't think Landmark's doing too well, so
yeah.
I don't think it was anything personal, River Oaks.
Right. Anyway, but there was one day we were there. It was around the time that Zuzu Spettles was getting started, and your brother Robin was there, and we were hanging out in the lobby talking about our careers. And it's funny to think at the time we were all still in our early 20s at the time.
Yeah. Let's talk about our careers.
And Robin was like being self-deprecating, say, I don't know, I'm still waiting to be famous or something like that. I don't know if it's going to happen. And I said something like, well, David Bowie didn't hit it big till he's 24. And he says, so there's still hope. I said, yeah, like Wilford Brimley.
Yeah. Well, sadly, I've had people over the years make the Wilford Brimley reference to me whenever I was that, and I'm like, yeah, well, I'm now basically the age that Wilford Brimley was, so I'm sitting there going, yeah, I guess it's going to happen soon. I better start working on how I pronounce diabetes.
So let's get into this. Back in the aforementioned day that we've been reminiscing about, when you and I lived only a few minutes away from each other. So pretty much weekly, you and I were hanging out and we're talking music, talking movies, talking Superman.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny to think back then, really, there was only maybe 1.5 decent Superman movies
I know.
existed. And that was really also 1.5 good superhero movies, because there really weren't that many.
I mean, just
then.
look where, obviously, that's another thing of like, we've lived so long. But when I think that, that in our lifetime, I mean, I'm sure when you were a kid, just like myself, we had Super Friends cartoons on Saturday mornings. We had reruns of The Adventures of Superman, the 50s show, which I did love because it was all I had, and reruns of the Batman 60s show. And then we had the Incredible Hulk. I mean, really, we took what, and I say this a lot to my friend John, who is 30 years old and a huge comics and superhero nerd. I'm like, you take what you get. Like, if you're a fan, you realize it could be so much better. But I'm going to watch this because it is thematically what I want. It's like, I'm going to watch this live action Spider-Man show, which is horrible, but I'm going to watch it. I'm going to watch the 2 Captain America TV movies, which are terrible, because it's at least a cousin to the thing that I love. And then things started picking up. Do you remember? Do you remember where you were on the opening of '89 Batman?
Yeah, I was. I went to go see that with some friends from high school. It was a sort of a semi date, like a double or triple date. Yeah.
Nice.
I was late.
Oh wait, so you had like 3 romantic partners? Nice. Yeah, that's the way to do it, Chad.
Well, I remember I was late to the movie, and the girl I was dating had to wait for me outside because I decided I was coming from work, and I had decided I wanted to go home and shower first because it's a date.
And you had that Batman outfit that you'd already laid out.
No. Yeah, so I missed the first like 10 or 15 minutes of the movie.
Oh, are you kidding me? Never. Oh, yeah. I couldn't do that, even if I had to shower.
What do you think of that movie now?
It's still pretty great.
Yeah.
The reason I picked that instead of like Superman the movie we definitely are going to be talking about. But I will say that '89 Batman is the more clear line of where things start. When it starts, the thing that led to MCU and all of that of, oh my God, big budget, taking it seriously, and not just a one-off, because then it has sequels, and then they're trying to get other movies off the ground. And you're like, oh, okay, it starts the whole superhero film movement. Like Superman the movie didn't. I love it, but it other than its own sequels, it didn't suddenly spur other superhero movies, which is weird.
It is weird. And I was wondering about this earlier. It's like, well, how much of that was the technology just wasn't quite there yet. Yeah. But also I think, well, especially in the case of that movie, that you had a handful of people who got it. Richard Donner just sort of intrinsically. Yeah. Thank you. What the hell's wrong with me today?
I'm going to state how old we are.
Okay. He just got it. He just understood it right from the get-go because he was already a Superman fan. He's like, I know how this needs to be done. Yeah. Nobody else has done it before. Verisimilitude being the...
Yeah. Literally on a piece of paper, whatever, above his desk.
Which Kevin Feige has carried over into the MCU, that whole state of mind, thankfully.
Yeah. You take it at face value. You take it seriously.
But he was wrestling with the Salkinds. This is a classic producer-director battle, right? So I think that really has a lot. That is probably the bigger problem, is that the IP has been in the hands of people, and still is in the hands of people who don't quite understand how to do it properly. I'm not
jumping in there just yet, but holy hell, man. And I worked for Warner Brothers in a tour guide capacity, but all I could keep thinking is like, guys, talk to me. It's like, can I help you in any way with your IP? Because you don't can get it. Anyway, the thing about Batman, Tim Burton's Batman, is it is its own beast. And the problems I have with it now are the same ones I had with it then. It does not hamper my enjoyment of it because, again, in its own way, it is taking it deadly serious, but in a very cartoonized, even more possibly than the comic, because it leans so heavily in Tim Burton's aesthetic, which is a good marriage because he's very gothy and all that. But, I still hate the Joker is the guy who killed Bruce Wayne's parents. That's just too tidy and screenwriterly, and I don't like it. Plus, it means I had the same problem with Gotham when that show was on, where I'm like, if he meets all of these villains before it's just this closed circle where it's like, my mailman ends up being Mr. Freeze or something. Like, don't do that
Yeah,
bullshit.
yeah,
Plus the fact that the age gap is so big. It's like, by the time he becomes Batman in his 20s, he'll be beating up middle-aged men. I mean, the fact that Jack Nicholson he's perfect casting, but he's perfect casting 30 years earlier. So a middle-aged chunky Joker isn't exactly what I'm after. And again, you've got a guy in his 20s beating up a middle-aged man who has lost his mind
right,
and loves Prince music. But
right.
but on the whole, as a superhero movie, great. And am I excited to see, Keaton back in the cowl? Yeah. And the idea of a multiverse makes all of this okay. It's like,
I know
it's
it's
like
kind of
you can
brilliant with
still
him.
like Bale. Bale's Batman exists just in a whole other place, and you can like these other Batmen, and that's fine. Um, did you watch any of that, like the Crisis on Infinite Earths thing they did on the CW shows?
A little bit. I had
I
kind of
didn't really
checked out
follow those shows,
from
but
the yeah.
I
I
came
was
back
a
for the
kind of
special events.
yeah. I was excited about the Flash when it first started,
Yeah,
and I always had problems with it, but there were some things I really liked. I liked the guy who plays Cisco. I
yeah.
thought his character was cool.
You mean
The
Vibe?
You're right, and yeah, it was good, but it just started really getting. And they were the cool thing about that show is that they would do crazy plot lines and stuff that had to
Yeah,
do with multiverse
yeah.
and time travel and stuff. And but it started to get it kind of unravel and get weird.
Well,
And I don't know.
I gave pretty much all of the CW shows a season. I think I watched Arrow longer just because it was the only one for a while. But yeah, the TV-ness of them kind of, and the way they would, which is true of Warner Brothers in general. There may have been fans at work, but they still basically were reaching in a hat and pulling out like names, pulling out characters, and not thinking about how they should be done, but just, it doesn't matter. The fans will go crazy. Well, why is Vibe an employee of Star Labs? And why does Star Labs have literally 3 employees? One of whom will be Vibe, the other one will be Killer Frost.
Yeah.
Okay. What do these guys have to do with the Flash? Nothing. And then you're just like, what? Just like Felicity Smoke, the character over on Arrow, you're like, that's an actual character from the comics who has nothing to do with Green Arrow. Why does she end up being his love interest? So it's just stuff like that. I'm like, guys, are you just throwing stuff in a blender and going, here we go? So that does bug me. That isn't really helping fans if what you're doing is just give it the name. They don't really care. They'll just be happy that we're including this person. No, do it smartly. That's what we like.
Yeah. They
Look
never
at what
had a
Feige
roadmap.
does. They do it smartly.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't want to deify that guy too much, but they got very lucky to find a guy who is a good producer. One, like he literally is a good producer, but someone who is the overseer, who is a deep nerd that changes Marvel. Oh man, I'm getting on my soapbox. Chad,
Come
oh,
on.
gotta get it. Okay, I gotta move it over here.
All right.
Give me a second. Getting on this. Okay, up on the soapbox. And here's the thing. The thing they do well, they make plenty of changes from the comics, which every now and then, yeah, I can nitpick because I'm nitpicky as a longtime nerd. But all the changes, and this is what John and I have talked about many a time, my friend John, is their changes are smart. When they make them, you can see why they made them. And it is not going to match entirely what is comics continuity, because you can't, and I do realize that. But they get close enough, and it doesn't feel out of character. It's when stuff feels thrown in like a hash, which is what the WB has done from the get-go with all of the DC characters. It's just like, guys, it just takes someone to oversee it. It just takes one person who gets it and say, you want to use that character? Fine, but this is how they should be introduced, and they should be introduced over here because organically it works well the way, and fans will be happy that you paid enough attention. You know, it's like we're lucky we got like a Gorilla Grodd in the Flash. We got a Captain Cold. We
It's
got
true.
these classic rogues gallery.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you're like, yeah, TV,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and CW, whatever. What are you gonna do?
Yeah. One thing I was really thrilled with, but it was kind of like it turned out to be sort of disappointing in the end, was when they started doing the arc where they introduced Firestorm.
Yeah,
Who Firestorm, when I was a kid, he was Firestorm and the new Teen Titans were
yeah.
like my two favorite things that were running at the time. So when they started doing that with the professor and everything, and they finally got to the scene where he's in his head talking to him,
Yes.
so I was like, yes,
Yeah.
But then he just disappeared. And they didn't do anything else with it.
It's like they did like toss crumbs your way, and for the longtime fans, and I gotta say, Victor Garber, right? That's the actor as Professor Stein. Great choice. Love
great
Victor
casting.
Garber.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, no, it's the same thing. And I will say, us being the same age, it's exactly what you're saying. We are also very lucky because weirdly, comics grew up with us. We were kids during the end of the Silver Age and into, the Bronze Age of the 70s. And that was the first time that the really simplistic Silver Age starts getting a little smarter, because you have all those dope head 20-year-old like ex-hippies start to write it in the 70s, start making a little bit more mature. Then in the 80s, when we are teens, they start taking the characters into any even more mature stuff, and the medium starts to bend, because you have Dark Knight and Crisis on Infinite Earths and Watchmen and all that. The comics essentially grew up with our generation to a fault, because now it's all people like ourselves gatekeeping and saying, no, I want comics to be the same as my age, and I want them to be tailored to me. And I find myself going, oops, we went too far, because there should be comics for 10-year-olds. And I keep going, the Superman they're going to read now, or whoever, whatever character they're going to read now, is probably way too mature for them. And you need the next generation to have the same experience we had of reading those like kind of cheesy Silver Age and Bronze Age stuff, but for their generation. Comics should always be able to grow up. These characters are eternal. There should be kid versions of all of these things. Batman, if you just went from like an early reader's Batman story of like, I'll get you, Joker, you know you won't, ha ha ha, oh no, foiled by my own plan, and then you immediately go to like the death of the family storyline of Court of Owls, you just sort of jump to something where the Joker has peeled his own face off and stapled it onto his head, and you're like, oh, what? Oh, no, But I agree with you on one thing, which is like I said, we were very lucky. I love that same stuff, because things like Firestorm was an attempt in the, late 70s, early 80s to create like the teenage entry character, just like over at Marvel, because Spider-Man was not quite married yet, but he was older. So they introduced Nova. You had Nova, you had Firestorm, and then of course New Teen Titans. New Teen Titans, come on! I've reread that stuff and it holds up. It's so
Really
fucking good.
I still have all. I need to dig them out. I mean, I love
Kitty
that so
Pryde's
much.
entrance over at X-Men around the same time. You have the kid teenage entry level character. And, as like a 14-year-old reading that classic run, I'm sitting there with a crush on Kitty Pryde, because I'm like, she's so adorable. She's my age, and she gets to hang out with Nightcrawler. Like, this is the best world ever. So yeah, no, I love the comics of our youths, and I still read plenty of comics, but I do find myself going backward a lot and revisiting, but also reading stuff I missed at the time. Like, oh, people loved this in my youth. I just didn't read it. Now I'm reading it, and it's great.
Yeah. Like it's making me want, because I've gone through periods of my life where I'd buy comics for a while, and then the price would go up and I'd get pissed off and I'd stop buying them.
I hear you. Yeah.
It happened. So I haven't really been a regular comics purchaser or reader in a long time, but
it's okay, Chad. I'm here for you.
Man. You and I were talking about this stuff, and I haven't read the whole article yet, but the article that you wrote for John at his site, the Superman
Starter's Guide.
Starter's Guide, yeah. And you have a bunch of really great recommendations in there. And I'm trying to remember now because because you had told me a long time ago about Mark Waid, and I was watching some videos about him last night, and one of the ones he did fairly recently was Birthright, right?
Well, fairly recently, as in almost 20 years ago. But yes, yeah, that I think it's 2009 maybe, so not that far
for
back.
me,
but
that's fairly recent in comic.
No, yeah, understood.
Terms.
And Birthright was great. What was sad about Birthright was what I said in the article is that it was literally DC saying, we want you to give us the new origin, update it. And he was like, okay. And everyone loved it. It was critically well received. But then they had one of their big crisis kind of things where they rebooted the universe and it was no longer valid. So they're like, well, we hope you enjoyed Birthright, but it has beautiful art. And I really did like, because it focuses on, okay, I don't want to get too much into the whole religious metaphor that is Superman, but Superman has sort of the Christ story parallel in the fact that absolutely, but also the fact that there's a section of time that doesn't get explored a lot, because the Jesus story, like he does the whole thing in the temple, and I'm in my father's house as he's a kid, and Mary and Joseph love the kid, and then suddenly he's the wandering, preacher man, and you're like, what about those years in between? So this is what Birthright kind of did, was focus on the time between Clark leaving Smallville and coming to Metropolis as, a reporter. So there's the teens to early 20s where he's just wandering the world. He's not in a costume, and he's just learning about different cultures and learning how to use his powers.
Yes.
Love it. So great.
That's what they keep doing the Superman shows at the wrong time. It's that sort of Smallville, the eternally edging going on.
Man, I gave up on that show already. I know, I gave up. I couldn't.
And you were just talking about Gotham. It was the same problem. A lot of really kind of cool things that they did and cool characters that they brought into that show. I loved that whoever the actor was who played Gordon.
Yeah,
I thought he was great.
Yeah, absolutely, and of course,
Donald
Logue as Bullock. I'm like, this is great casting.
Yeah,
a lot of the casting was good, but yeah, as other people said, it's like it's what you've always wanted. It's the story of before things got cool.
Yeah,
you're like, okay, great. I want to see people in their normal clothes walking around having a normal life, but all these like heavy-handed winks. And with Smallville going 10 years, they literally just said they made a Superman show, but just denying you Superman because he's fighting villains every week. And you're like, I would like it if it was one season or 2 seasons of seeing Clark as a teenager where he's not saving the world from, superpowered menaces, because that's fine. A season of him being a normal kid but learning his powers is great, and ends with him going off and creating the Fortress of Solitude, maybe. Great. Mm-hmm. But not 10 years where we're sitting there going, Jesus Christ, he now has kids. He still hasn't put on a cape. I mean, why are we calling it Smallville? He's been in Metropolis for 5 years now. I mean, just stop it.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff is dumb, but it became the thing, and I don't like that.
Yeah, that's why it would be so cool if they would do a show based in that time period you were just talking about.
Yeah,
because that's something also, hasn't really been explored in live action much. I think that would be
crazy money if he is like world traveling. That's the thing. It's like that I do love that Birthright throws you, because when you start reading it, you're in Africa. It is literally like 19-year-old Clark Kent, and for 2 or 3 issues, it's him dealing with local warlords and things like that and learning another culture. And I'm eating it up because I'm just like, great. Because you're seeing, you might say, well, where's the costume and and why are we focusing on this? It's just showing how his morality is being built and what matters and what extent he's going to use his powers. He could easily wipe out the enemies of this wonderful tribe that he's friends with. He could do that. Should he? It's like, no, of course not. He realizes he can't be that. He can't be the kind of savior that just judges and then executes and takes people out. So the forming of his character is what I love. He gets everything from, the Kents. That's the foundation, is getting that stuff from the Kents about just decency and morality. And then he sees how it plays in bigger stakes than outside of than Smallville. And then he earns that suit, and then he is our friend, and we can trust his judgment. That's the thing. It's like, having a Superman sounds great, but it's all about, are you going to trust that person?
Mm-hmm.
Because that person could just set himself up on a throne and go, well, I know what's right for everybody, and just, I am now Emperor Superman.
Right.
And plenty of storylines have done that, by the way. They love making an evil Superman storyline at DC. It's like, oh yeah, in this one, it's an alternate universe. Oh, this is Earth 3. Oh, this is a thing. Hope you like an evil Superman.
Yeah,
well,
which is
maybe once or twice.
They've been doing that on Superman and Lois, which I've heard through Jerry that you're not a huge fan of that show.
Well, it is about me being nitpicky. I don't mind them being parents of kids. It just leaned. I watched like the first 3 or 4 episodes. I will get back in because I've heard how good it gets. And I do like that guy. And I do like Lois. But I was sitting there going, yeah, it's a little CW. It is a little teen angsty family drama. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know.
It's better than the other CW shows for sure.
Yeah,
but
that's what I've heard.
It's also bad. Some of the writing.
Of the DC shows, I like the ones that pretty much they aimed at the streaming service, because I do like Stargirl. I like Stargirl, Doom Patrol, pretty great, pretty amazing. And I do like what they're doing with Superman and Lois. I just need to give it a bigger shot.
Yeah.
And it is the Superman that I like. I like that they have kept him. They haven't angsted him up. He's just being a dad, but he's still Superman.
He really does it well. And I like the idea, they never, because that's another thing they never explored is in live action until now, is him being a parent.
Yeah.
So they've done some cool stuff with those things. Like you've got one kid who has powers and the other one who doesn't for some reason.
Yeah, that's kind of a twist. Yeah.
And I keep thinking at some point the other kid's going to wind up having powers. I keep waiting for it to happen.
But aren't they? Again, this is from someone who's just kind of heard people talking about it more than watched it, but aren't they kind of leaning into, it's possible his jealousy will create, he'll be kind of a bad guy?
Yeah, unfortunately,
like he'll be a Lutherish type.
Well, this gets into the stuff that they're doing now, and I'm going to wind up spoiling some of this for you. Which,
well, I knew that the guy that everyone thought was Luther from another dimension ended up being John Henry Irons. I know that. And then the character everyone thought was going to be Doomsday turned out to be Bizarro, was kind of the twist. So these are things I've already heard.
Yeah, the Bizarro storyline they did was actually kind of cool.
I've heard good stuff.
But then then Bizarro disappears. He doesn't come back. And like, just bring him back. He was awesome. Just not really consistent. The main problem that they're doing
is hard to do consistently, because the writer's sitting there going, does he say me hate Lois or me love Lois? I don't know what he's supposed to say.
They don't lean that hard into it. He talks backwards. And the way they do that is kind of cool. It's like if you're from the Bizarro universe and you're in Superman's universe,
it's just literally like Zatanna backwards speak.
Like what?
Like Zatanna backwards speak.
I get so only people who have Kryptonian powers can figure out how to reverse their speech so that people can understand them. So
does he come from a square world?
The Earth is square, the sun is square. They lean hard into that, and whenever you're in the Bizarro world, like everything's written backwards and stuff. It's kind of neat.
All right,
music is playing backwards in the background.
I'm gonna watch it.
It's pretty cool, but it still gets frustrating though. And the big problem that show makes, as far as I'm concerned, is there's just too many Kryptonians and there's too many people with Kryptonian powers, and there's a special kind of kryptonite they find that people inhale it, and they get temporarily get
man, that's powers. A little bit like Smallville, where the only explanation for it's like, geez, how does he keep running into these powered people? Oh, it's because of kryptonite rocks. The kryptonite rocks that landed when he crashed turned people into mutants. Too many people with superpowers.
Yeah, and they're doing the same thing in this one. There's a little bit too much of Smallville in this show because it's
Well,
in
it does
Smallville.
start with "Somebody save me." No, and by the way, I'm sorry I did that because I think that just cost you money. Sorry, we didn't get the rights to that.
Yeah. Oh well.
But no, I will give it a shot. I mean, the thing is, I do think the great thing about the character is, well, besides it being perhaps one of the greatest fictional creations of all time, is that it is so durable that you can bend it, alter it, tweak it. I mean, they did that from the very beginning. So I can't sit there going, there's a pure Superman. It's like, well, Superman didn't fly in the beginning. He just did those big leaps. So along the line, people keep tweaking the character. You can make him unpleasant. You can, but it's better when he's not unpleasant. So I do think that he will be here long after we're gone, and I don't know what people's Superman will be like 40 years from now. But as John likes to point out, and it's true, he goes, dude, I know you hate Man of Steel, and I do. I think Henry Cavill is a good choice. He just got a terrible movie and terrible script, bad take on the character. But I'm sitting there going, John says, I know you hate it, but that's somebody's first Superman. There are going to be 10-year-olds who see that, and that will be their version, and they will love it. And they will sit there going, I prefer Superman when he was snapping necks and crying about it. and that's gross to think about, but I'm like, yeah, I guess. And when we were reading that stuff in the 90s, which was I'd say 80s into 90s was a high point for Superman comics in general. But there were kids younger than us that didn't come up with the 70s stuff. So kids at that era, like for them, their first Supergirl was a protoplasmic creature that just adopted this persona and was bedding down with Lex Luthor in a clone body. I'm like, okay, that's someone's introduction to that character. Oh, I'm so sorry for you. But that is true for every version. It's going to be someone's ideal version, and we can't gatekeep. We can't say that is the wrong version.
It's like the Star Wars prequels is the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. Some people love them because
this whole thing.
It was their first Star Wars movie was Phantom Menace, and they loved it. And Amidala all day long, and Jar Jar Defenders, which is the name of my new band, by the way, Jar Jar Defenders. But so anyway, I mean, I get it. I do feel that I'm an old man that sits there on my porch going, "That's not Superman." But there is a core to the character that. Oh, speaking of Mark Waid, I think he's the one, or is it Kurt Busiek? One of those two great comics writers. I read their take on Man of Steel, and they said that they sat in the theater opening night, squirming, not liking it, but hanging in there. And the second that Clark and Zod are having their showdown in the museum, that they said, I'd never talk out loud in a theater. It's not my way. But I've started going, no. And he goes, and the second that neck snapped, I got up and walked out. I have not seen the end of it. Now, I did stick around, but it's true. When you see something that so doesn't get the character, the core of it. And I know that Snyder was thinking I'm being ballsy with some of my reinterpretations. Like, no. In this world, Pa Kent wouldn't be talking about all that stuff. Pa Kent would be trying to protect his son by saying, hide your powers. Don't help other people. Let me get swept away by a tornado. And meanwhile, I'm sitting there going, excuse me, Mr. Snyder, wrong take. Wrong take. Terribly wrong take.
Yeah.
Casting, I got no problem with. Kevin Costner. Great idea for a new Pa Kent, but just a terrible take. Wrong-headed. It's just like when I saw Dark Knight Rises, the third of the Nolan movies, of the Batman movies. Within 8 minutes of that movie, and I had enjoyed Batman Begins and Dark Knight. Within 8 minutes of that movie, I suddenly realized, oh my God, this guy has made 3 movies about this character, and he doesn't get him at all.
Really?
Well, have you seen it? Did you
Yeah,
watch
it's been
those?
a while. I
Well,
like the
but the
first
whole
two.
thing,
Yeah.
yes, but the whole thing is, we meet Bruce Wayne, and he has been so devastated by Maggie Gyllenhaal, his girlfriend's death in the previous movie, that he has spent 8 years hiding in Wayne Manor, walking around with a cane and growing a beard and feeling bad for himself. And that is like in the first 8 minutes, I was like, oh shit, you don't understand Batman at all. That tragedy would have fueled him. In fact, the criminals would have been beaten bloody because he would have been working that shit out on the streets. He doesn't go and hide for 8 years.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, that's a shame.
I forgot about
it's a
that.
shame, Mr. Nolan, that you've gotten this far without understanding the character.
Which sadly is very reminiscent of another bad take on a character recently. Rian Johnson and what he did with Luke Skywalker.
Well, okay. See, here's where we divide. I agree it's disappointing, but I really did like Last Jedi. I thought it was a daring and necessary swerve, and then I felt really embarrassed by Rise of Skywalker.
Oh, God.
Because of the way it was like, let's pretend that stuff didn't happen and I'm going to paste over it.
Yeah,
and I'm like, that's not what you do. It's a yes and thing.
Yeah,
it's just like an improv. You say that did happen, and now I'm building on it instead of saying, "Oh no, I'm making you happy, right? And here's some Palpatine. Do you feel better now?
Here's some Palpatine.
Hey, you know what?
Like Ovaltine.
You look at a little peaked. Have a little Palpatine. I made you a little something. Here's a little Palpatine. But I do understand people's upset about Luke in Last Jedi, and I get it. I as disappointing, yes, but I still thought it was good.
I was going to be okay with it because I was kind of hopeful.
And I thought that death scene was badass, or at least his force battle with them not realizing he's not even there.
That was brilliant. Yeah, the thing that pissed me off is like we just got Luke back, and you're killing him immediately, and I just thought that was a really stupid move on Lucasfilm's part to say, let's go ahead and kill Luke Skywalker in his first appearance. And because Mark Hamill is so passionate about the character. He's up there in years, but he's taking good care of himself. He's enthusiastic
great.
as
and
hell.
I do think that's amazing acting he did in both. It's true.
Yeah.
He gets his one movie. I will say that Obi-Wan, I loved him in the first movie and they fucking killed him. It's like, we just got to know this old man. And now he's a Force ghost. Right. They did the same with Luke. I mean, he does show up in the third movie like, hey, Force ghost. Yeah. Look at me. I'm all shimmery.
Right.
Pretty cool. Here's Hayden Christensen right next to me. Sorry about that, everybody.
Which we knew is going to happen with his character at some point. So sure. Obviously, he's going to become the new Obi-Wan, and then he's going to sacrifice himself.
Yes.
So that I knew that was coming. It's just like I just wish they'd waited at least one more movie.
No, I get it, and your response is totally legit. I find myself being such a Last Jedi defender mainly because of the amounts of shit that were dumped on it. By fans who were upset about everything, upset about her being related to nobody special, which I thought that's brilliant. The idea that the Force does work its way through random people. The whole thing with the little stable boy using the Force power. I'm like, that's the point. It shouldn't be all about one family's lineage. It should be about whoever picks up the mantle. So I liked all that. Yeah, it could have been edited. I think there were parts that was like,
the whole
trim that. The casino planet.
The casino planet, yeah.
Let's trim that down by about 8 minutes, and we're a lot better. We're a lot better.
I don't know what he was thinking with that part. But one of the things I really like that a lot of people don't like is when he suddenly kills Snoke in the middle of the movie, and I thought that was brilliant because now he's the supreme leader of whatever that, what are they called?
The First Order.
The First Order, yeah. So I thought, okay, now he's essentially the Emperor.
Yeah.
So we get to see him, and and then J.J. Abrams comes back, which I was excited. I was like, oh, cool, because I liked Force Awakens. I thought that was with a few quibbles with that one, but overall it was a nice kind of return to form for the franchise, I thought. So he comes back and he's just basically like, I don't know. It was like a Jackson Pollock painting. The whole movie is like, I don't know, just oh yeah, a wedge. Let's put 2 seconds of wedge at the end of the movie. That'll make people
And
happy. Like,
the whole thing of, look, I know that they're amongst fans of a particular stripe. You know, gay panic is a stupid thing, but the whole thing of Finn and Poe, they could have ended up as a couple, wouldn't have minded at all, got no problem with it, but it's the desperate, that's what I'm saying, wallpapering, the introduction of two characters, both of whom I kind of liked, but the more characters you introduce, the less time you give to characters that we have been following. Finn and Poe both got reduced. It's like, we love those guys. We need more time with them. But if you introduce new love interests for both of them, which is just to placate people, like, don't worry, the guys aren't going to end up kissing. Don't worry. Look, they both got hotties. Look, Finn's got a hottie. Poe's got a hottie.
Yeah.
Well, we had to spend time introducing them, and that took away time with those characters. And I don't blame, like, John Boyega for saying, dude, they shafted my character and they shafted Poe because they don't get an arc. It's like they set Finn up to be this, and then by the end he's got his own little adventure, but it doesn't matter. And like,
but that was another problem with The Last Jedi, is that they gave Ryan too much freedom, because he's like, yeah, I'm not so interested in that character. I'm going to go do this, and so JJ's there going, damn it, because he had this whole thing planned, obviously, which he tried to wrap up really quickly in the last one with Finn, but being so sensitive.
Making shit up with, like, I mean, it was him correcting what he saw as mistakes, or what the internet saw as mistakes, and they're like, she has to be more special. We have to do something weirdly quasi-romantic between these characters that it's not earned at all, as in the weird, don't get me started on Rey kissing Kylo Ren. I'm like, fuck this noise. Fuck it so hard. I was just like, no. Yes, and you take what Johnson did, and you find an organic way to wrap it up without pandering, and Palpatine is pandering. Making Rey a Palpatine is pandering. I don't mind her taking the name Skywalker at the end, because that is a tribute. But I would still rather she be the child of no one. It's like, it should not be exclusive to this like insular little group. We're talking about a galaxy spanning story, and it shouldn't just be about the Skywalkers and the Palpatines. Doop, doop, doo, doo, doop, doop, doo, doo. We just hate each other. It becomes like it's the Hatfields and the McCoys.
Right.
Is that one of them Skywalkers I see over there? Yeah, Pappy Palpatine. It's one of them doggone it Skywalkers. It just, I want it to be a bigger universal thing where, and that's what, and also Lucas shot himself in his own goddamn foot with midichlorians. The whole idea of this specialness. I'm like, no, it should be about what Obi-Wan was saying in the first movie, is just, and by first movie, I mean episode 4.
Yes.
But it's like, look, it surrounds us all. And people can become Jedi just by focusing on the Force. It is a life where you dedicate yourself to connecting to this life energy. Great. That's a mystical, religious thing. I dig it. But then making it anything scientific, making it about cloning, or making it about, I was like, dude, don't. And then making it about two families. I'm like, no. It should be like, I'm John Cabable, and it turns out I'm very Force sensitive. Turns out, I guess I'm the last hope for the Force. Crazy. I just found out I'm the balance. All right. John Cabable. Before this, I worked in a packing plant. Turns out I'm the chosen one. Okay. But it should be that universal. Like, it could be Chad Smalley. Chad Smalley could be, the chosen one, and I would follow you into battle with a lightsaber of the color of my choosing.
Yes. So now that we're on this subject, what do you think of the of all the Disney Plus stuff that's going on?
Bullshit. Half a bullshit. No. It's been hit and miss, but I'd say that of the Marvel stuff too. I will say that even the misses I've enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, a bad Star Wars show is still, none of them are embarrassing. In other words, some are like Book of Boba Fett. I enjoyed. I was like, I don't think this was what people wanted, and I don't think it quite worked. But Mandalorian, I've enjoyed very much.
Yeah.
I liked Obi-Wan. I liked it. It wasn't what I wanted. I liked it. I was like, I do think the little actress they cast, the little actress as young Leia, she nailed it.
Oh yeah.
Like that's exactly what I assume young Leia was like.
Yeah.
But I was sitting there going, but doesn't this cause so many problems?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's her old pal Ben. Why is she talking to R2-D2 in episode 4 about General Kenobi? Never met you, but heard that you worked with my father in the Clone Wars. Yeah. I think that's kind of bullshit too, because I've seen all the prequels. You didn't really work with my father. But anyway, do you think you could help us? Certainly haven't met you before. Outie. And then that's the end of the message, I think.
Yeah. They do. There's one little line of dialogue they did throw in there. They try to address that at the end.
Which is like, pretend you didn't know me,
or something
like that.
Must be careful.
I'm like, all right. I did love the end. Where I love the fact that model that Luke is playing with in episode 4 was a gift from Obi-Wan.
That's cool.
And when he walks up and the last thing he says is hello there, which is an Obi-Wan thing that he says all the time.
Yeah, and we knew that was coming the whole time. He's like, that was the best part of that scene. He was like, oh, here he comes. He's going to say it now. Yeah.
Hello there.
That's very well played.
And I loved Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru, as protective.
So good
parents. Like it wasn't just them farming. They were always on the watch. I love that. Like they were like, which explains how crabby they got. But I mean, I love the fact that they're sitting there going, it's like they're coming and they have like a battle plan. I'm like, yeah, go Uncle Owen, go Aunt Beru. And I love the fact that they bring those people back. I love the fact that it's the same actors. I'm like, that's awesome.
And I forget the actor's name. He plays Owen.
I don't remember his name.
So good. It's one of the best. That was my favorite thing about the whole show is all the scenes that he was in, like the scene where he confronts Obi-Wan and says,
I love their relationship where he's like going, you are dangerous by just being here. Yeah. You think you're protecting Luke? I'm protecting Luke. Get the fuck out of here, Jedi.
And that was so great because that's not verbatim, obviously, but I had that scene in the back of my head, my own headcanon, for decades. And there it finally
is a very important. I think if we keep doing this, and I'm welcome. I want to do this and chat with you about this nerd stuff until we both croak. But I'm just saying that headcanon, I have a feeling, is a word we'll be bringing up a lot.
Yes.
Because for people who love anything, for people who love My Little Ponies and God bless you, or whatever it is, Steven Universe, people get addicted to these universes and characters and continuity, and they're constantly like figuring out how this worked, or we never got to see the story of how this happened, and this is my idea of how that happened. So I've been writing stories with Superman and the Star Wars characters and Dracula and whoever in my head, and sometimes on paper for a long time, because you can't help it. If you're that invested in that world, you don't own it, but you can't help but think about that stuff. Love it. Anyway, but yes, I agree. I thought both those actors from the prequels, I enjoyed them in the prequels. I was like, I think even though they don't get a lot of screen time, they really did cast that well. They nailed a young Owen and Beru, and they fleshed out characters that have almost no screen time in 4 and are really just there to be the parents, the adoptive parents that are a little too hard on them, but they know why they're being hard on him is that they know that's a very special young man. So I dug that shit.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah, so Obi-Wan in general, I did like. What am I missing? Is that all of them? Oh, Bad Batch. I mean, I loved Bad Batch.
I thought that was good.
But I loved Clone Wars, and I liked Rebels. So anytime they refer to that stuff, I cannot wait for Ahsoka's show. Cannot wait. Andor looks good.
Andor looks pretty good. Yeah.
Dude, here's one of the things I really wish, like, again, for those listening, and I can't imagine anyone's listening, or they're not listening this far in, but I'm just saying, one of the things that sucks about you living 18 million miles away for most of our adult lives is that these movies have come out, and I didn't get to see them with yourself. Like, Rogue One, we fucking would have been there. We would have been watching that together. We would have seen the sequel trilogy. We would have seen the prequels. I saw Phantom Menace, by the way, at Mann's Chinese Theater opening night at 3:30 a.m. And
Ziegfeld
huge line. There were local comedians, one of which I knew through my brother, who picketed the Star Wars line dressed as Star Trek characters, which was very funny, walking around as Vulcans and holding signs that the Force is a myth. It was pretty great. But then I watched the movie and left the movie at like 5 a.m. going, I don't know how I feel about it. I don't know how I feel. It looked really good, was what I kept saying. It looked really good. Yeah. That's pretty weak. But anyway, so I missed those experiences because it would have been fun to like go to House of Pies after and sit there and eat an open-faced chili burger and talk about
chili size.
The chili size.
Yes.
I've told people, it's like, I will die soon. And if people say, what was the cause of death? In my 20s, I often would eat chili burgers at 3 a.m. after shows. I'm pretty sure that's what's going to do it. The House of Pies chili size and chocolate shakes. Man, I miss all that stuff. Anyway, so yes, I'm excited for Andor. Though his character I liked, but he wasn't my focal point in that movie. So I was surprised that he's the one getting a series, but I'm fine with it. The trailer looks great. I'm not anti that character. I was just like, geez, I love the samurai non-Jedi guy more. I'd rather watch a show with him. Yeah. And his brother or friend or lover, never quite figured out what their relationship was, but they were my favorite parts of Rogue One. Yeah, so anyway, I'm looking forward to that. And Ahsoka, I mean, Rosario Dawson is, I want to put her in everything, is what basically I'm getting to. She's in all those great Netflix, Netflix Marvel shows, and now she's Ahsoka. And that one episode where she showed up in Mandalorian and kicked all that ass. I tried to do, like, I'm no scientist, but I tried to actually estimate how much ass she kicked in that episode on a just empirical. I wanted numbers. I can't count that high, Chad. She kicked too much ass to even count. Do you think that I'm jumping ahead here, but she shows up in the Book of Boba Fett, and which is essentially 2 episodes of The Mandalorian. Yes. Which we'll talk about in a second. Yeah, it was so weird that it's like, really, Boba Fett can't sustain an entire show without having this subplot? Okay.
So, though I was happy. Dave Filoni, I think, has hinted that we're going to find out how Luke meets Ahsoka later, probably in the Ahsoka series. Yeah, but Luke and Ahsoka seemed to be something between them. Did you pick up on that? There seemed to be some kind of...
Maybe, but it did seem more like there's this intimacy because she is a direct connection to his father. Yeah. And so it is sort of like, and maybe she did, I don't know, at some point when he started his Jedi Academy, which is, that's what we see. Yeah. It's him founding it. So maybe, then what did they?
I'm just thinking that once he says, will I see you again? Like, ooh,
oh, yeah.
You know, there seemed to be kind of some kind of romantic.
I don't know, because you seem to be digital.
You're young for me.
And digital. Right. Yeah. I'm not sure I could kiss you because, that would be weird with the mocap.
You're right.
I thought that was, the jury's out, but what they can do now is pretty impressive. And with deepfake, it's going to get probably even more impressive.
The one thing I didn't like about that scene, those scenes, it was a surprising amount of scenes in that episode with Luke. Yeah. I thought he looked great. It was a huge improvement over what they did at the end of season 2 of Mandalorian, which I love. That scene is absolutely amazing.
It's just, we never did get in Rogue One and in that scene, we got to see them like we didn't in all the other movies, Darth Vader and Luke just being badass fighters. because Luke would walk in and like Return of the Jedi, and he would take out a couple of guards and throw someone up against the wall. And that's impressive. He'd walk in and he'd lower the hood and I'm a badass. How you doing? But this was like full on, like you see all the stuff he learned and he's wasting a fucking like military unit. I'm all about that.
Yeah.
And in Rogue One, Darth Vader walking down a hallway, destroying multiple people with just sweeping his hands around and fucking lightsabering. Oh, dude.
Yeah.
I hate to be such a fucking nerd at 53, but I'm just sitting there going, more!
It's glorious. Yeah.
More!
It's absolutely glorious. The one thing I didn't like about the digital Luke is that apparently they also use computer AI to regenerate his voice because it's not and actually Mark Hamill talking; it's a computer talking.
Yeah,
which seemed you could kind of tell. It just
it's what they've done with. That's what they did with Vader in his episode.
That was good though. That worked. I thought.
Well,
I thought
did.
Vader's voice and Obi-Wan
because I was sitting there going, the last time I heard, James Earl Jones actually doing it, I was like, he still got that power, but you hear the age. And I was like, oh. And then when I heard, because I didn't know what they had done, when I watched the episode, I was like, holy shit, did he suddenly get younger or better? And then I find out they just pieced it together through all pre-recorded. They've just got words. They have him speaking words and they can just manipulate it. And I'm like, that's nuts what they can do now. Yeah. But it sounded so good.
Really
I was
good.
like,
so they're getting better
holy
at it.
shit.
Yeah.
And in the case of Darth Vader, you can put anybody in that fucking suit. Darth Vader could now be in everything for all time. Darth Vader can show up in a Star Wars movie 40 years from now and will sound like James Earl Jones.
Yeah.
And I've just predicted the future of entertainment. I have to admit, digital Moff Tarkin was a little weird.
Yeah. That was sort of the beginning of them kind of toying around with this.
Like
this
sometimes
idea.
Dead on, but also sometimes it's like, I don't know if it's because he's digitally reconstructed, but I was like going, that body's too big. Like Peter Cushing is a slight dude, but he's standing on that bridge and someone comes up to him and is like, Grand Moff Tarkin. And that guy is like dwarfed. And I'm like, how is anyone shorter than Grand Moff Tarkin, who's a slight British old man? Literally skeletal. But every now and then it looked pretty good.
So what do you think happened with Book of Boba Fett? Because this is one of the most fascinating things to me. Is like we were just coming out of 2 seasons of surprisingly, amazingly good Star Wars
surprising is
series.
The word.
And then we get to Boba Fett, and I thought first 2 episodes pretty good.
Pretty good.
The second one, third one, and then all of a sudden they're like, fucking hey, there's the Mandalorian. Let's bring the Mandalorian in, and it just seemed like
they have to have mapped it that way.
It's so weird.
I think they didn't weirdly. I think they went softer with a Boba Fett series than they should have. In other words, I think Mandalorian is the one that has the surprising heart, but a redemption story for Boba Fett should have been, if he's going to be redeemed and be actually like, I want to do a good job as the leader of whatever, blah, blah, blah. It does need to be harder. He's a harder character, and it felt soft. And then they include like, I know that Robert Rodriguez is like, yeah, well, see this local gang, just like with Lucas was obsessed with his, stock car racing and street racing. And that's why you have all this stuff in Star Wars. I'm doing the same thing with these mods, literally mods, because they've modified their bodies, but they're also mods and they've got scooters and they're bright colors and all this. I'm like going, yeah, it's not that it's a bad idea, but again, candy colored stuff on Tatooine. Plus, they kept saying like they're the poor kids, they're the ones in the street rats.
Right,
I'm
they
going,
can't afford water.
They dress nicer and have cooler vehicles than anybody else in that town, so I'm not buying that.
No.
So in other words, I think it did. It just sort of, and you've got a badass Boba Fett. The guy's back. I love that. And you've got what's her name? Fennec, thank you. And she's badass, and she's shown to be a badass. But then it does become, and you introduce, why would you have someone like Jennifer Beals come in as an interesting character for like 2 episodes and kill her?
Yeah.
Blow her up.
There's a lot of that going on in the show.
I know. It's like here's a celebrity cameo, and they're dead.
Like
anything with Timothy Oliphant, I'm down for.
Was he the?
He's
the
the
major domo?
marshal.
Oh, the Marshal. That's right. Yes, yes. God, he was fantastic.
Yeah, but then they, pretty much killed him.
Well, apparently he's still alive at the end. He's
Oh,
in
good.
the
Yes,
he's in the
yes.
back to
But,
tank.
they brought in Cad Bane in live action. That was awesome.
That was great. I wish they hadn't waited so long to do that.
That's true. I think that's the thing. I would have rather have seen kind of a more adult mob like, because that's what it was kind of touted as, because he's heading a crime family. I was like, make this bloodier. And it's not that I'm bloodthirsty. It's just make the show fit the character.
Mm-hmm.
Have him earn his redemption by really violent means, and then it should have ended with him like getting that throne. In other words, that should have been the story.
Yeah.
Not that he wasn't shown doing badass stuff. I was like going, okay, now he has a Rancor beast as a pet. Okay. I was just like,
they didn't really lean hard enough into all these really cool ideas. Like when the twin huts show up in the second episode. I'm like, of course. This is brilliant. Black Chrysanthemums are bodyguards. Like, this is great.
I know.
I thought, this is getting good. And then we come to episode 3 and they're like, nah, never mind. Tatooine sucks.
I certainly didn't mind a continuation of the Grogu Mandalorian story. And then you're throwing in Luke and Ahsoka. I was like, well, why didn't you just put this in season 3 of Mandalorian? Why is this here in Boba Fett? I know that the guy who plays Boba Fett is not the best actor. I mean, he was cast to be just like the badass guy, and all the clone soldiers will talk like me. Because, great, but he did a fine enough job. It's just
I don't have any problem with that.
Yeah, the show was weak sauce, and in the end, it was weaker than it needed to be.
I mean, getting into touching on the headcanon thing too, that was one of the things that made it frustrating, I think, for everybody who was looking forward to this, is that they weren't quite doing all the things we thought for sure that they would do, especially with the setup where we see him taking over Jabba's throne. It's like, that's perfect, because that's his life before he falls into the pit. That's what he's doing. He was working for Jabba, and so I liked the Tusken stuff too. But that was another thing too. Is like we get to really know these characters, and then they all die, and we never see them again. You mean
Dances with Wolves?
Yes, right.
I don't care because it was so well done, and him like constructing his own gaffa stick. Is that what it's called?
Mm-hmm. Gaffa, something.
Yeah, and all that is great. I like finding out backstory, and we're seeing what happened. That did give us what we wanted. What happened? Him post getting chucked out of the Sarlacc pit. That is what happened. That and him having to spend all that time in the back to tank and all that stuff. Great. Having flashbacks, that is fine structure. But I do, like you, when I was watching it, it was me going, why are we going here now?
Yeah.
What does this have to do with anything?
And he alludes to Bib Fortuna double crossing him somehow. We never find out what that was.
And also, I think, just like you were just saying, is that there are things that you would love to see that happen so quickly that they don't give enough time. Like, there's also kind of a redemption arc, or at least I have saved you, evil bounty hunter Wookiee, and now maybe you'll be a ally, a good friend. And I'm like, yeah, in one episode. I'm like, wouldn't it have been better if there had been some lasting feud and many a battle, like an arch nemesis that it wins his respect or whatever? I mean, an awesome character. He's awesome to look at, and I know he is from. Is he from one of the games that I've never played? I think that's where he started. That character,
Black Chrysanthemum.
Yeah, I think he started
I only know
in one
from
of
the Obi-Wan comics, or the Star Wars comics is where I first saw him.
Oh, okay, so maybe the comics, but then one of the games. Jerry has played all those games.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I played Knights of the Old Republic back in the day, and
me too.
And that was great. And I have Jedi Fallen Order, which is the most recent one they did, but I didn't get too far into it because I'm not good at games.
Yeah.
In other words, it's like, oh God, I'm terrible at dodging. Oh no, I'm dead. It's like, okay, well, I've lasted an hour in the game. I've gotten to one stop on the storyline, and I'm like, and I suck at this. I'll probably pick it up again. So I do wish it had been better. That was a disappointment. But Mandalorian, like you called it, I didn't have high expectations, and it just blew me away.
Yeah.
It just
Yeah.
blew me away. The idea of a baby Yoda, I was like, no, please, God. And I was thinking about, was it you? Were you in on the fan theories for a long time? One of the fan theories was that is actually Yoda because he says in one thing, one of the sequel trilogy, he says something about one of the it was in Clone Wars. One of the ultimate ascended Jedi things is learning a mastery over time as well. And so there was a fan theory about he had reincarnated himself. And then I'm like, well,
50 years before he died.
Yeah, I was like, that doesn't quite work, guys. I like it. But this is just Grogu, and he's adorable. And he made Werner Herzog's heart melt. I love that interview. Is like going, they brought it in, they showed me the puppet, and I said, I love him.
Yeah.
And they were saying they were going to replace him digitally. I said, no, you must always keep it the puppet, for the heart is in this puppet. It is, I cherish him. I'm like, thank you, Werner Herzog.
Okay.
I'm glad that my friend Klaus Kinski is dead. Otherwise, I am sure he would have torn it limb from limb with his teeth.
Werner.
I'm just saying, Klaus was a crazy bastard. But anyway, yes, we're in agreement on the good shows, the not so good shows, and we just have to see what happens next. I'm trusting of Dave Filoni and, of course, also Jon Favreau. I just think they get it. Just like we were talking about with Donner and Superman. It's like Lucas did lose touch, or he got so up his own lore's ass and forgot how to be a storyteller, and that's okay. His ideas remain awesome, but the way he did them, he just forgot how to tell a fucking story.
Do you think this? I know this has been talked a lot about too, but it seems like, especially when he was doing the first two movies, that he was leaning very heavily on other people to get things done. And there were a lot of people around him going, maybe you shouldn't have C-3PO have the voice of a used car salesman, or like his wife.
Yeah.
That scene where Obi-Wan is telling Luke about the Force and they watch the recording of Leia. The original flow of that didn't work. It was weird and clunky and ill-paced. Have you gone and see this? The editing, how that whole scene was kind of switched around?
I do have that book, The Day by Day of the Making of the first movie. So I mean, I know how close that movie got to not working.
It could have been horrible.
It could have been horrible.
And then of course with Empire Strikes Back, where he gave it to Irving Kershner, but then Irving was going off and doing things that Lucas didn't want him to do, but he had to let him do it because that was Irving's condition of taking the job in the first place. But I think they're all lucky accidents that worked out. But I think Lucas, it is a thing where he needs and has needed for years voices unafraid to say this doesn't work. And I think Dave Filoni was that voice for him on Clone Wars because they worked really closely on that. Mm-hmm. It's like, I kind of wish maybe
I think Dave Filoni still did it very respectfully. Yeah. Absolutely. But I think that it's different than, like, say, being friends with Paul Schrader, who's sitting there going, George, this is bullshit. I mean, the whole thing is like, I watched the rough cut. He goes, I don't know what the fuck this thing is. And he's like going, you need to explain it to people. And it's Paul Schrader going, look, and on a napkin, like, you need to open it with like some explanation. And the opening scrawl, the opening crawl is because like he had friends like Schrader and of course Spielberg, who was always, he was the more positive, but you had, Coppola, he had these buddies who weren't going to baby around him. They would just go, that doesn't work. This is nonsense.
Yeah, exactly.
And then when you become a multi-billionaire and you're doing your prequels, not a single person is going, George, these are great ideas, but look, here's the problem with your script for Phantom Menace. You have to have a central character. You need a central character. You can't keep bouncing around. Is this Qui-Gon Jinn's story? Is it Obi-Wan's or is it young Anakin's? You also need someone to sit there and go, George, this humor you've written in doesn't work. It's not funny. This character doesn't work. You also need someone to go, that is not a good child actor. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
He is blonde
Mm-hmm.
and cute, and he looks like what a young Anakin Skywalker would look like, but he's not a good child actor.
Yeah.
So you just need people that's like say, George, with all due respect, this can be better. And it will be what people want if you fix some shit.
Right.
You know, the second Anakin goes, woohoo!
Yeah. Yippee!
Yippee!
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm out, man.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But it makes me sad thinking about, and I was one of these fans who was, happy when Lucas sold Star Wars to Disney. I was like, ooh, this bodes well. And The Force Awakens came out. I was like, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
But now I'm thinking back and thinking about the connection that he had with Filoni, and like a lot of the Clone Wars stuff is really now, I think, becoming much more appreciated than it was when the show was out.
Dude,
it makes me sad.
Here's the thing. I didn't watch it. I didn't watch that show. And it was, it takes a little while for me to accept something as being canonical when it's done in this cartoony 3D CG form. So I was like, just visually, I can't look at this and believe this is the same universe that I care about. Then I watched a few episodes, I think pre-pandemic, but I was just kicking in. The pandemic was very helpful for me because I was like, well, it was very helpful for me. I love the pandemic, said Brendan Jones. That's a terrible quote. But I was able to watch the entirety of that series and was like, holy shit, this was some of the best Star Wars storytelling I've ever seen. And it makes sense, and kids can enjoy it, and adults can enjoy it. And then Rebels wasn't quite as good, but it was still good. And I was just sitting there going, I am impressed, Mr. Filoni.
Mm-hmm.
He should be given the reins.
Well, he is doing the Ahsoka show now, right?
I know, but I think they should just let him guide the entire universe.
I agree. I absolutely agree. I agree.
Because he knows all of it. He just knows all of it and gets it.
And I just wish, maybe it's too late for George. I just kind of wish they could bring him back for some ideas.
He's going to be a figurehead for every, and I think, Filoni's calling him. He's like going, I had an idea for this. What do you think? And I'm sure that he still gets input. Mm-hmm. But you just have the creator is now the man of leisure that sits there on his ranch going, it's pretty good. I like where you're going with that, Dave. I'm taking a call about Willow now. I need to go though. And by the way, Willow looks pretty good.
Is there a Willow sequel?
Willow series.
This is breaking news for me.
It's a Willow series that is going to be on Disney Plus. Oh, wow. And they just debuted the trailer, and it looks great.
No shit.
And you've got what's his name back. So it's Willow original. You've got the Brownie guys, same guys, now older, but they're just like. And of course the effects are much better, but they're like, Willow, my friend, and they're back. And now you have like Mad Mardigan and what's her name's daughter is joining. It's another like world. We need your magic. We need your help. And even you've got Joanne Whalley back playing the mother of the character. So sadly, not Val Kilmer back as Mad Mardigan, but so it's all the old hands, and it looks great. It's a sequel series. Yeah, it looks awesome.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah, this was just announced like because they just did their big D23, the big Disney reveal where they announced all the Marvel movies coming up, and Willow series is coming, and I can't wait.
Yeah.
And probably George was probably looped in as far as like, hey, you want to sign off on this? Yeah, dude, that sounds good. That's my
you make him sound like Kermit the Frog.
Well, he does have a weird little voice. Mm-hmm. I try to imagine him directing because it's probably like, stormtroopers, can I get stormtroopers? Sorry, can I get the megaphone? Stormtroopers, hey, can I get you guys to walk around like idiots? Great, thank you. But did I tell you I saw him once in the wild, like out in the world?
No. When was this?
When I lived in LA. Most of my celebrity run-in stories are when I lived in LA, and I was at the Grove, which is this fancy shopping center, has a movie theater, and I was seeing Children of Men, which was great, by the way. Seeing Children of Men, and by myself that afternoon, just sat on, they got these couches in the lobby, and while I'm sitting there, I was like, holy shit. I looked to my right, and the couple that are sitting next to me are George Lucas and his wife. And they're on the same couch. And I'm like, not going to bother them, not going to freak out. And I'm just sitting there going, holy shit. And then while I'm sitting there, just like eavesdropping a little bit, not too bad. But then Bryce Dallas Howard comes over and she's like, George. And he's like, Bryce, hey, how you doing? and she's pregnant at the time. And I'm like, Bryce Dallas Howard. And I'm like, big crush. Anyway, so I'm like, don't embarrass yourself. I'm just a person. And it's like, oh, how are you doing? I'm wonderful. Where's your husband? Oh, he's just getting the popcorn. Okay, great. What are you guys seeing? Children of Men. I was like, oh, they're going to see the same movie. And then George goes, oh, and where's your dad? And she's like, oh, he's going to be here any minute. What? And then fucking Ron Howard shows up in a baseball cap. I'm serious. And I'm just sitting here, and they are talking as they would. They all know each other, just like pals, like, oh, how's your summer going? Oh, great. And I'm just like, Ron Howard, Bryce Dallas Howard, George Lucas's wife. Sorry, don't know your name. And I'm just sitting there going, fuck. And so, of course, when they started going in the theater, I just sort of surreptitiously followed. This was not an assigned seat theater, so I just made sure I was in the row right behind them. I mean, all it meant was we all watched the same movie at the same time, and I sat behind them going, "Oh, hey, that's George Lucas. That's Ron Howard.
Oh, that's beautiful."
And I was like, and the movie was great. And then I walked out, and they're like, "Oh, it was really good. Okay, see you later. Bye." They said that to me because by then we were very good friends.
Of course, yeah.
In the movie, it wasn't a comedy, so I would have to do things like, "Oh no, oh I'm sorry, did I disturb you?" Brendan Jones, nice to meet you. Watch out, Clive Owen. Oh, I'm sorry, am I disturbing you? Hi, Brendan Jones, nice to meet you. No, I didn't do any of that. But it was one of those weird encounters. I didn't say a word, didn't bother them. I just was like, that's cool. They're just people going to see a movie. But that man created something just unbelievably important to me. It'd be like it if I had ever met Siegel or Schuster. I mean, it just would have been like, dude, you're just a guy. But I'm sorry. What you did, oof.
That's kind of like I almost met David Byrne. It was kind of a similar situation where I was just like,
wait.
But I can't, unfortunately, I have to tell the story next week because.
Yeah, I know. We should wrap up.
Oh, and Brendan, do you have any Twitter website kind of stuff?
No. No? I have very little web presence. No, but here in Portland, we do a live show monthly called the Tesla City Stories. Yes. And so we're at Plugs. This is Plugs. And you can go to teslacitystories.com to find our dates and buy tickets. And that is well worth. It is 1940s radio shows done live on stage. So that's awesome. And if you are of a mind to look up an over 10-year-old graphic novel, my graphic novel, Breakfast of the Gods, which is about the serial characters involved in a huge Watchmen-esque battle, is still available on print on demand at Indie Planet. And you can buy the full graphic novel, and I get a little chunk of change from that. So just Google Breakfast of the Gods or This Complete Breakfast of the Gods, and keep me fed.
I will have the links in the doobly-doo or whatever they call it.
In the doodly-doo.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the thing I love about Chad Smalley, because he always puts the links in the doodly-doo.
I got that phrase from Hank, what's his name? Hank Green.
Oh, yes.
The Vlog brothers, what they're called.
Don't let on, because he'll want money for it.
Yeah.
And Chad, people can find you at Blaggards.
Blaggards.com, yes. And everywhere else Blaggards flavored.
So you've heard us babble, and we will babble more. Let's do this next week.
Like we say, we've got 30 years to catch up on.
Holy shit. We still haven't talked about the birth of your children. We'll get to that next week.
What?